And I was thinking in the course of putting this together, realizing that it's almost exactly, but I can't, I'm not going to swear on anything about this. 50 years ago that I did my first work, somatic work with a client. 50 years. And I say that, I decided to say that for a few reasons. Well, not one reason is because just to give you a sense that I've been around with this for a while. And the second is because, my aging is very much on my mind a lot of the time. So it's there. It's there for me. It's present for me in my consciousness. But the more important thing, the more essential thing of why I'm saying this, because I want to convey that somatic work is not new. No, it isn't something that emerged just in the past 10 or 15 years, kind of fell out into the sky somewhere, just suddenly was discovered. It's been around for a long time. In fact, it was around for a long time when I got into it. Okay. So I think it would be fair to say within the Western tradition that somatic work, ideas about the connection between the psyche and the soma and emotions and therapy and working with the soma was there very early on within the psychoanalytic community. Even Janet, who Freud studied with, already proposed many ideas that we have come back to. And so a lot of where I come from with this is wanting to draw in some of the understandings that were there, that have been discovered, rediscovered, repackaged, kind of added onto because there was an attachment theory at that time. There wasn't the study of trauma in the way that we understand trauma at this point. The advances in neurology and what we know about the neurological system and affectivity wasn't there. And yet there was a lot there. Okay. And this is just in the world of the Western psychology. If you take Eastern psychology, right, throw it back, it adds hundreds and hundreds of years. So where I want to draw, and I draw a lot of my work from, is three aspects. One is the work of Wilhelm Reich, and I'll just speak very briefly about Reich. Two is the field of Gestalt Therapy, which a lot of the somatic work comes from Reich's work. And third, and this might surprise you, is the work of Carl Rogers, who one would say, what does he have anything to do with somatic work at all, period. Yeah. But those are three central roots that I'm going to, just briefly speak about. If you don't know, Wilhelm Reich was a student of Freud, very in the 1920s and 1930s. He, as a young analyst, brought into the world of psychoanalysis the whole idea of character analysis and the whole idea that essentially the body keeps the score. No, he never said that. That was not his, but he did say, in other words, that the body keeps the score, meaning that the way a person develops and the way they move and the way they act is all part of the way they regulate their affect, the way they learn to modulate themselves in the world. And it's the way they then behave in the world, which is their character. And their character, bless you, forms, and the major defense is against emotional feelings and expression. So, you say the person is uptight. You say that because they are uptight and they walk around uptight and literally they up themselves tightly. And in the way that they are uptight, They are speaking about what emotion they can feel and not feel, what they can surrender to and not. And their history is embedded in that presentation. In other words, for Reich, what he presented, the psychoanalysis, is that the unconscious lives in the body. And at that time, as psychoanalysis was attempting to find a technique and using a technique of looking at symbols and looking at words and looking at what is happening in the person's mind, Reich saw that often with clients, if you want to get to their repressed emotions, you have to look more directly at what is in front of you, directly in front of you. And what is in front of you is the person sitting, standing, walking through the door in front of you. In other words, their body. So, Reich developed him and his colleagues and young therapists who were very intrigued by this approach and actually to actually possibly do a little better job with their clients. A system, what he called character analysis. And he writes about this in the book Character Analysis. And that was integrated into psychoanalysis. And essentially, it was the analysis of the character versus analysis of the psyche. Psychoanalysis versus character. And by analysis, what is analysis? What does it mean by analysis? Analysis is being present, bringing that present to the person, how they are in the world, which is their character, and being able to, together, in a dialogue, be able to help the person see, as you see and experience, how that way of being in the world either supports them or makes things worse. Or another way of saying it, supported them at one period of time, but ceases to be functional as life continued, as environmental conditions continued, as we moved from childhood, adolescence, adulthood, young adulthood. Okay. And in making that apparent, in the analysis of that, and the function of that in terms of how it serves the person, especially around their emotions, their emotional regulation, in their interpersonal contact with others, a person could then feel more, express more, understand themselves more, and possibly, which is our hope, change. And not only change themselves, but change in the way that they change the world around them so that they can live a more functional, happy life, which is, I guess, what we want. I don't know about the happy part, because sometimes in our world we're not going to be happy, but maybe more functional and more connected with what it is there is. So that was Reich was doing, and I say here, he really tied on to the whole idea that there is an energy, a life energy, a sexual energy, a life energy that is there within all of us, with all living creatures. In other words, we're not separate from animals. We're not, we are animals. And because we're not separate, we have that same energy. And we express that in the same way that other animals do. So we call that the expressive language of the living, which is kind of like the body keeps score. Okay. Now, so to briefly move on, though, one of his students, and who's in analysis with him for 3 years, maybe 5 days a week, so had a good taste of Reich, was Fritz Perls. Okay, and Fritz Perls went on to put together a form of therapy called Gestalt Therapy. He and his wife, Laura Perls, and Paul Goodman put together this therapy. And if you're familiar with it, it has a lot of ideas that Reich did. But one of the things that Perls and the Gestalt therapists did is that they jumped on this idea, which is so important, of contact. What is contact? Contact. It's not mysterious. Not something like we have to even look it up in the dictionary that much, though we could. Contact, the meeting. One of the things that Perls liked about Reich is he felt contact. When he was with other analysts, he felt there was no contact. There could be contact. First of all, he was laying down. The person was behind his back. They weren't really interrelating, but they were blank screens. There was no contact. But with Reich, there was contact. And he went from a very depressed soul, Perls, to actually far more enlivened and became the rascal that he is, or was. Okay. And in his therapy, yes. But contact became a very important point. And he began to frame his work around contact, and they began to frame their work around a certain biological process that was known within Gestalt circles in terms of the way we perceive and make contact with the world in our perception system. And so awareness, contact, and experimentation became a very important point of Gestalt, and I think it's very important in our particular work. And what do we mean by experimentation? Is very simply, you look at a child and you see how they learn in the world. And how do they learn in the world? They pick something up and they drop it and they look and they see what happened and they pick it up again and they drop it another way and they'll drop it another way and then they'll try to stand on it, maybe lie on it, maybe put it on their head, maybe do all sorts of crazy things with it that we think are crazy. And what are they doing? They're experimenting. And what are they finding out? They're finding out about themselves. They're finding out about the world. They're finding out about the environment. So, experimentation. So, I guess I'd say with both of these approaches, you're not just sitting and talking with people. And I'm talking now, and I'll probably have to keep talking for a while. Talking is good. Talking is important. Okay. But there's other things that they're doing. There's movement. There's engagement. There is something that is other than this part of ourselves. Yeah. Now, so then I learned in Carl Rogers, and where does Rogers fit into a world of somatic therapy? Well, where he fits in is the fact that, one, if you read Rogers, he has an enormous trust in an organismic process of growth. And that under the right environmental conditions, grow. We're like plants. We're like, you put the right conditions, they come up. You don't have to give them a manual, and you don't have to deal with their cognitive distortions. They will grow under the right conditions. But what are the right conditions? And that's the key point. And that's the point that oftentimes people don't understand, I think, about Rogers in terms of what the environmental conditions are. So there are three, very important. One is that there's a person in the other room and you respect the other person as a person in the other room. Boy, that's something to remember. Okay, two, you as a therapist need to be congruent. Mean, get outside of your mask, please. Be in the room, be real. In other words, have contact. And number three is to really be able to have empathy and listen and feel into the other person's way of being in the world. In other words, to be in their own shoes, to step into their own shoes, but still have your own feet. Okay? What could be more somatic than that? Try stepping into another person's shoes, and you feel your feet. Okay? So it's those three things, three elements I think are or those three places that I draw from that are very important that we'll kind of come back to. So what I want to say here about somatic therapy then is that it is not verbal psychotherapy plus somatic interventions. It does not equal. I used to be into mathematics. I thought I was going to be a mathematician. So I had to put in a do not equal sign here. It is not equivalent. It is not equal to somatic psychotherapy. It isn't like you sprinkle in something in, you add something different. It's not about that. What is it about? Well, what is it about? It's about understanding the organism, understanding we as organisms, how we exist in the world, how we feel, how we move, how we organize ourselves, how that is true for the other, for ourselves, and how through that understanding we make contact. And we use that to help the person find themselves, find their feelings, emotions, understand their perspectives, and then from that from there grow. So in order to do that, we have to understand about breathing, we have to understand about how the body moves, understand about where affect is, what is affect, understand about all those particular things. But understand it from a sense that there is two living organisms in this room, in this world, in an environment. So in a couple of minutes, if I'm going to try to keep to this time period, which if I'm going to be aspirational and actually succeed here, I want to talk about, just say that what we're really speaking about is affectivity and animation, because we're really speaking about and with what it is to be alive. Now, as a person gets, if you work with very young children, I like to come to young children because we see there's a cycle. And this is going back to my whole thing about where I am in my life cycle. Okay? Look at young children and they are alive, unless they've been really traumatized. And then you see that they become less alive. Okay. But what is it when they're alive? Right? They're pulsating, they're jumping, they are skipping, they are moving, they are speaking quickly. You ever walk down and you see, probably it's more with, young girls than young boys because maybe we're acculturated that way, some particular way, or the way we're verbal or not. Same age as 7 years old, and they are just talking their parents' ears off. They are just talking and da 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 and skipping at the same time. And boys are doing that in their own particular way too. There's movement, there's life, there's animation. When you have a young puppy, they run you ragged, right? And they're just jumping, or a cat, or whatever it is. Life is animated. Life is alive. Life pulsates. And this is not just with animals. This is any living organism. Reich studied living organisms under the microscope. What did he find? He found that all living organisms do one thing. They pulsate. And when they stop pulsating, that's when you stain the cell and look under a microscope and you think you're living, looking at what life is. But no, you're living, looking at what death is. You're looking at something that is not alive. But if you look at living organisms under a microscope, that's what's happening. That's the pulsation of life. That is our animation. And that is the basis of movement. That's why those young children are skipping all over the place. And that's why worms are going like this. It's the basis of movement. Life moves. Life moves. Which would make then, if you want to stop life, hold back life, deter life, squash life, inhibit life, what do? You stop moving. Okay? You inhibit your movement. It's a key element. Key element. You inhibit a movement. Now, maybe when you inhibit a movement, you'll have to move somewhere else really, really quickly to avoid the movements that you are inhibiting. But you inhibit a movement. And all emotion is movement. I say to you, portray being overjoyed. You probably will have to move to portray it. If I say feel overjoyed and you decide to feel overjoyed, you are probably going to have to move to portray that, to feel it, to be it, or angry, or frightened, or even ashamed, or whatever. Emotion is movement. And pulsation is the basis of that. But when we say we're moving, what is moving? We are moving in our bodies, So a key word, a key idea in somatic therapy and somatics is embodiment. And what does embodiment mean? I struggled with this for a long time. What is this embodiment stuff? What's that really? But I finally am getting it, and I think so. Maybe I'm getting it. Embodying means that we all have bodies, okay? And we exist in a body, and we feel through a body, and we understand through a body, and we make contact through a body. And in fact, everything is through a body. In fact, sometimes we kind of say, well, we think with our minds. Well, where is our mind? It's probably here, maybe, or here. But we might say it's here. But isn't that part of the body? How did the brain get dissected from the body? Where is it located? In the vat? Not yet. It's not located in the vat yet. So it's in the body. We are embodied. So again, if we are embodied, the body is in front of you. Your body is with the other person's body. And it's with that body that we make empathic contact, that we make connection. And how do we do it? And what is that relationship between that and empathy? What is that relationship at all? Well, the relationship is such is that to really understand what a person is saying, really understand, like the person is saying, I ran here and I tripped and fell. Oh, and I felt so down upon myself. I wanted to get to this class and I was running. I tripped and fell. Oh, I ripped my pants. I felt so down on myself. And I said, oh, you stupid person. You want to understand that. Understand that. Feel into the person's saying. It's more that they decided to get down on themselves and they had a self-critical thought, and that led to a negative emotion on their part because they had a self-critical thought, and that's what they do. Yeah, that's all part of it. No, they're not. But you will understand. What you understand is the movement of trying to get here, the rush. I really want to be on time. I'm excited about this. And then I fell. And I fell, and that surprised me. And I hit my knee. Maybe it hurt. Maybe I was a little shocked at that moment. And then I found myself there, in that place, on the floor, on the ground. And I had a feeling about that, about being there, on the ground. And I said to myself, or felt, you stupid idiot. And I believe, to really understand that is to live that in yourself. You're not going to feel it the exact same way because you're not that person. You have different whims, you have a different need, you have a different sense. But you can feel it in a certain way, approximately. And it's from that moment when you can feel that. It's there when you have an empathic connection. You don't become the person, but you have that empathic connection. And it's from there that Carl Rogers, I believe, could make an important empathic statement that captured the totality as best one can of that phenomenology. Not from a point over here, like I'm observing it from above, but from the lived experience. And that can only happen as you merge into the person's totality of their phenomenology, which is their physicality. And now that example is clearly very, very physical. But what I want to dare say, and what I do say, is that if you listen to a person's language, the body is in there all over. all over the place. But you have to listen for that. Just in the same way as the person sits in front of you, you have to see what is in front of you. The way they sit, the way they move, their expressions in their face. Okay. And if you listen in that way, you see in that way, you feel in that way, because the only way you can feel it is if you connect with your own organism. The only way you can feel it is if you connect with your own. And that's really the only way, A, to be empathic, but really to have contact. Have contact. So, there's a language of the body. How a person moves, sits, what you observe. If you get anything out of this, I want you, when you're with your clients next, to be with them as a body and to observe their physical behavior. You don't have to do anything else. No tricks, no maneuvers, no different kind of breathing techniques, or whatever. Just be and observe, feel them. And not only observe, but see if you can observe with your whole being, with your own body. And if you get anything. There's the language of the body. Okay? And then there's the body that's in our verbal language, which is just an extension of the language of the body. Young children are reading your language all the time before they have language and before they understand language. They read the language of the body. Okay? And when you as a parent are attempting, if you're attempting, and most of us are attempting, to really be in contact with our young children, we are reading their language of their body, their cry, the sound of their voice, what's in their facial expression. Are they arching their back or are they moving forward? All those different things. The language